At first, it looked like a simple missing person case, but the truth would shock an entire nation. In the summer of 2002, a quiet neighborhood in Modesto, California, suddenly became the center of national attention. A young pregnant woman named Laci Peterson had disappeared on Christmas Eve. Her husband, Scott Peterson, told police she had gone out to walk the family dog and never returned. At first, the case appeared to be a missing person investigation. Friends, family members, and volunteers searched the area for any sign of Laci. Flyers with her photo were posted across the city, and the media began covering the story. Because Laci was 8 months pregnant, the case quickly attracted national attention. Scott Peterson appeared in interviews asking for help to find his wife. He spoke calmly to reporters and told them he hoped she would come home safely. But as investigators started digging deeper into the case, small details began raising suspicion. Detectives learned that Scott had been having an affair with another woman named Amber Frey. What shocked investigators even more was that Scott had told Amber he was a widower before Laci even disappeared. When Amber discovered the truth, she immediately contacted the police and agreed to help them with the investigation. Working with detectives, police allowed Peterson to record phone calls between her and Scott. During these calls, Scott continued pretending that everything was normal, even while massive search efforts were taking place for his missing wife. The recordings became crucial evidence showing how he behaved during the investigation. Meanwhile, police searched Scott's home, his truck, and his boat. Investigators noticed several suspicious details. Scott had purchased a small fishing boat shortly before Laci disappeared, but very few people knew about it. On the day Laci vanished, Scott said he had gone fishing alone in the San Francisco Bay. Months later, in April 2003, a shocking discovery was made along the shoreline of the bay. The remains of a pregnant woman and a small infant were found separately on the coast. DNA testing later confirmed the tragic truth. The bodies belonged to Laci Peterson and her unborn son, Connor. The discovery changed the case completely. Police now focused entirely on Scott Peterson as the primary suspect. Investigators believed he had murdered his wife and disposed of her body in the bay where he claimed to have been fishing. Soon after the discovery, police tracked Scott to a parking lot in Southern California. When they approached him, he was carrying large amounts of cash, multiple cell phones, and items suggesting he might have been preparing to flee. He was arrested and charged with the murders of Laci Peterson and their unborn child. The trial began in 2004 and quickly became one of the most watched criminal trials in America. Prosecutors argued that Scott Peterson had carefully planned the murder because he no longer wanted the responsibilities of marriage and fatherhood. They presented evidence about the affair, the recorded phone calls, and the timeline of events on the day Laci disappeared. Although the case relied largely on circumstantial evidence rather than eyewitness testimony, the prosecution built a detailed narrative of how the crime likely happened. They showed how Scott's behavior after Laci disappeared often appeared unusually calm and detached. The defense argued that there was no direct proof that Scott committed the murders. They suggested that someone else could have abducted Laci during her walk. But after months of testimony and intense media coverage, the jury reached a decision. In November 2004, Scott Peterson was found guilty of first-degree murder for the death of Laci Peterson and second-degree murder for the death of their unborn son, Connor. The verdict shocked and divided the public. Some believed the evidence clearly pointed to Scott, while others questioned whether the case proved his guilt beyond all doubt. The judge later sentenced him to death row, one of the harshest punishments in the American justice system. Years later, after legal appeals and changes in California's death penalty procedures, his sentence was changed to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Today, Scott Peterson remains incarcerated, continuing to challenge his conviction through appeals. The case of Laci Peterson remains one of the most famous and tragic criminal investigations in modern American history. What began as a desperate search for a missing pregnant woman eventually turned into a courtroom battle that captivated millions of people. And it left behind a haunting reminder that sometimes the person closest to the victim can also be hiding the darkest secret.